This year is a special year in many ways. It's our 25th anniversary. And at the same time, we have this incredible pandemic that has hit every part of the world. And indeed, this is a time for us all to take stock. And no difference at SCDA. We have taken this time to reconsider our work. And I'm going to share some of our thinking too. But more importantly, we have taken this time to do a hard pivot on going digital as we have offices globally. At the same time, we are committing ourselves to much more research on environmental issues. And to this end, my talk would focus on a case study that addresses cultural and environmental sustainability. Let me just start with the first slide. An argument for high density housing is important here, even though we speculate that people will move off to the suburbs to have more space and want to be more distant because of the pandemic. But I do think ultimately to be sustainable, one has to come back and pivot back to high density housing, which economizes on infrastructure, which helps to organize social compacts at schools, cuts down on travel and mobility issues, pedestrianization. These are key issues. So what I'm sharing here is some of our works that can be applied on a much larger scale. Concerns about light and air, spatial plasticity, integration with nature, and environmental and cultural sustainability. This is a diagram and pictures of 8 selected projects, which I will touch on quickly. And each of them carries with it a certain additional amenity or idea, such as pools or vertical landscapes. But underlying it is a very common way of thinking about space. And I will point it out as we go along. Space and program can be thought of three-dimensionally. And by thinking of them in certain ways, we can bring in our concerns of light and air, structural integrity, and other issues. So when we design, we usually start by thinking about space in a three-dimensional way, solving the program of marketing needs and clients' needs. Then we design the plan. The first project I'm showing, 2004 in Kuala Lumpur, is one that rethinks amenities. It has 93 units of apartment, but 94 swimming pools with 1 common pool. But what you're seeing here is the idea that each unit is a volume, a villa in the sky, that has been shifted to allow these penetrations to receive the pool. Pool is not just for swimming. The pool works very well with the organizational principles of the building, where the central core is a void, where all the AC compressors and yards are facing inside, where it creates an updraft. So the updraft brings in air through the pool, cross-ventilating into the building. And here you will see that we are also concerned about the climate. We have monsoon rains in Kuala Lumpur, so I've designed the curtain wall to be fixed. And these slots allow ventilation on a sheltered area. I call these monsoon doors and windows because you can keep them open during a thunderstorm. The second, the mark in 2006, 2 years later, you can see that the basic volume of space in the L-shaped module with a double-story living dining on one end, and we have flip-flopped the volumes and stacked them up. So that's a basic unit of composition. And then we work on the plans. And throughout, we allow for a transitional zone where you can open your windows and allow cross-ventilation. All the public areas, the escape staircases, are not enclosed, but rather have louvers or screens that allow for air. And you can see these sorts of transitional spaces that actually creates a feeling of living on the ground. And the spaces are also higher than normal to accommodate the depth of the swimming pool. On the ground, another consideration is to seamlessly bring in nature, which is one of our concerns, which is integration of landscape and nature into our buildings. So this is further illustrated by two more projects, 2008 and 2017, about connecting to nature. The title belongs to TwentyOne Angullia. Here you see that each building block is a small unit and a larger unit that is piggybacking on each other. So you have a double volume space in the corner and a small unit on top. And then a module of 6 of these are then stacked up to allow lots of cross ventilation and air and space. And also to be able to integrate gardens up vertically. These sky gardens are 6-story volumes. They're not 1-story volumes. They really allow rain and light and air to come in. And within that, we have huge landscape and amenities. It's a way of connecting to nature in high density housing. The drop off, and even the lobby is very compact and efficient. You can see nature's element be brought into the edges. It's totally naturally ventilated. The second project in 2017 is in Jakarta, and you can see also the same idea of using L-shaped units volumetrically to stack. And instead of pools, you have these double-story living spaces. And throughout this high-rise building, there's deep shading, a balcony that wraps around the entire building. I would call them more like verandas. So this is true tropical living at its best, because you can deal with climate, you can step outside. And the detailing in this project is particularly interesting because we're able to have these porches lined with warm timber and yet look fairly light and accurate and precise. On the ground plane, again, huge verandas that connect to gardens. Temperate. Not all projects are designed to be just tropical. The same principles can work even in temperate climate. I'm showing a project in Tokyo that illustrates the concept of vertical green urban sky garden. It is an apartment project in Tokyo that we did a couple of years ago. You can see from the master plan that there's a zone of greenery that connects all the new buildings. And in our case, we like to bring the greenery vertically upwards. But rather than taking them up in a straight line, you can see again how we think, right? There's unit mixes that are given by the developer. Sometimes there's studios, 3 bedrooms, 4 bedrooms. And we always start by imagining volumes and combining programs into a whole, a module that fulfills, for example, 30% of a 3-bedroom, 70% of some other size. And once we have fulfilled that brief, we repeat them. In this case, we slide them to create these balcony voids. And we imagine that they will have vertical green. So in a dense city like Tokyo, we could still introduce this sliver of green to connect back to nature and to bring in light and air. And on the top units, we could have a private amenity like a pool being incorporated. So high density housing is flexible and can integrate good spatial qualities. And it's not always meant to be tight and low ceiling. And then in New York, in 2015, we looked at another amenity, which is a sunroom. This particular project is on Central Park South. And it is part of a competition where we are shortlisted to the last 2 entries, but it's not going to be built. It's overlooking Central Park, and the same kind of strategy that we use in Tokyo is also used here. But instead of connecting a pool to the park, we raise the podium and have our own garden seamlessly connect visually to Central Park, very much like an infinity pool can connect to the ocean. And the same strategy, you can see the mix of units from small to large forming a module and repeating and sliding them and bringing greenery up. But because of the harshness of the climate, we felt that a sunroom that can be opened up during summer to enjoy Central Park and to take a piece of Central Park back into your unit, or in the case of the winter when it becomes a solarium, would be an interesting amenity to this city. And another New York project would be to interpret urban living. In this case, this particular project, I had a freer hand because I'm also the developer for it. And we tested all the ideas that we had and see if we could make it work even within a very dense urban area like Manhattan, where the planning guidelines of envelope control is very strict. They even control the amount of penetration you can have in the facade. So here we introduced 16 saltwater pools, high ceilings, and fireplaces to every unit. This is the site. The site is actually in the Highline district next to the Hudson Yards. And these are elevations of the completed project. The common strategy that we have tested over the years still works. We stack the different mixes upwards, but we also carve them into the basement. So the basement will have courtyards. And you can see the flexibility of this sort of methodology being applied to different situations. And I'm happy to say the final results shows that this can work even in dense planning districts. A more in-depth look at the plans. It's a very deep lot. So carving those notches in actually brings in a slice of nature into a dense environment, but also allows you to open windows on the side to the living room and to the master bath as well. And putting the core and the elevators in the middle gives this apartment a double frontage. So you get exposure to the north and exposure to the south. And this is the advantage of thinking of a unit volumetrically. A close-up of the saltwater pool and how it brings light and air deep into the building. And the end result is because we are a studio that integrates product design, interior design, and landscape design, we're able to create a seamless experience. And we get involved in designing, for example, products like the coffee table, chairs. In this case, this is a collaboration with a design company, Polyform, that manufactures furniture for us. And all the vanities and products, in this case, you see the special vanity with the makeup light. These are all custom designed. And where possible, we have setbacks to have these terraces that connect you to outdoors. And on the top of the roof, every unit gets to have their own pool and also appreciate the New York skyline. This is a range that we designed with Polyform called the Soori range. The chairs, the table, the sofas. Yeah, so that leads us to the presentation of the case study project, which I will dwell in greater detail, the concerns that we have. What I've showed earlier was just to illustrate that this methodology does work, and we have tested it over the years. Well, in 2006, we had an opportunity to rethink social housing. The Singapore government awarded SCDA this chance to design 680 units of dwelling as a prototypical new generation housing that embraces all the concerns of the day. We take the idea of multi-generational living. This is where I had the opportunity to test light and air, the plastic space, nature, and environmental and cultural sustainability. Well, back in the days when Singapore first became independent, relocating the populace into a higher standard of living was important with sanitation and water. So the first generation of public housing was very straightforward. And you can see that there's organic kind of activities that came out, night markets, festivals, etc. And that sprouted rather quickly in the 70s. A lot of units were built quite quickly, and it was quite utilitarian. And with advent of the rise on the standard of living, these social housing units, because of Singapore's urban planning, requires cars. And you can see these open car park lots in between buildings and trees and landscaping. But these open areas were rarely used. It was much more like a space to put your car and then you walk, not sheltered to your units. So this was the model that was built for some time. And amenities like how do you dry your clothes? So naturally people stuck them out of the window, and eventually they did have kind of casement holes for these poles. It was kind of accepted that the facades would be also the place where you get to dry your clothes. And the void decks, which obviously is a Corbusian idea of the pilotis, it's a tabula rasa space. Furnitures were fixed. You can see here people playing chess. This is a communal area that gets occupied by different generations, kids and older people too. You can see in this case a Malay wedding, because Singapore is multicultural. And sometimes next to this void deck, there's a partition, a Malay wedding, and then you can see a Chinese funeral next to it. There was a certain amount of flexibility to the space, and the void deck became an important public amenity, as 80% of Singaporeans live in this social housing. But I have to point out that the average profile of people living here is not exactly people who are living below poverty lines. Most of the professionals do live here because there's a huge difference in cost between private and public housing. And at times it's retrofitted to be a daycare. So it's a very flexible space. So a few years ago, we would say, let's rethink this. And we met with the ministers and let's see this. What are the concerns? What can we do to improve in terms of quality and addressing the social issues?